There are chairs. There are 2 more chairs out here. Somebody and one back there if somebody really wants to try it. So we did want to get you in here, and we did want to put up chairs because it makes things so restricted and moving around. So I hope you'll appreciate that. I'm going to go really fast. History is my passion. And those of you who know me understand that and know that. It's really fascinating. When we moved here about 25 years ago, I didn't know anything about this area. So I started reading and visiting and trying to put it all together. Since then, we've been able to form the Friends of History Center, move this little house to this neighborhood because somebody donated the land to us, and then open the History Center. But I don't do it by myself. There's a committee, an education committee, that every year decides on new topics. So if you've got something you want to know about historically, give it to us. We'll put it in our list to consider. We'd really like to know what you want to know about because that makes it really fun. And then the committee gets together, decides on 3 or 4 exhibits for the next year. Then each time, about 6 weeks before we open, the committee comes back together, looks at an outline, topical outline, and they pick what they want to research. So it's really active. So those posters that you see on the wall have been researched by members of the committee. And then Amy Parker, who is our administrative assistant, does the formatting for us. So this is how it all begins to come together, and the more people we have involved, the better off we're going to be. So we really need to hear from you guys. It will be a big, big help. So when we sat down last year, we said, well, what about the little towns, the deserted towns, the forgotten towns, whatever you want to call them. And some of you may have heard this before because it's one of the topics that I'm so passionate about. People don't understand or know or appreciate Compano Bay. I mean, yes, how many people fish it? I know a lot of people have fished it. And you may have seen the ruins for Compano, but what I'm going to show you briefly and what's all over the walls is that there were 4 major towns in here in the mid-1800s. And of course, there's a story that goes with each one of those. In most instances, there's nothing to see or it's not easily accessible. I'll take that back. You can see ruins if you know how to go and where to go. Okay, but there's nothing, in most instances, there's nothing standing. I'll just show you a few things like that. So I'm going to move very quickly and just talk through the PowerPoint slides that I've got up here that Maggie's getting back up. I know, don't you love technology? We still have one chair right here. Okay. So the prime book for this is a book written by Keith Guthrie, and he was a legislator, a journalist actually, and his book is on that shelf over there. It was called Forgotten Tours. So that was the basis for when I started learning about it. I'm sorry. There we go, there we go. Okay. Okay, we got it now. So first of all, of course, there's the band of Compano Indians, and that's how Compano Bay gets named. Some of you may be aware of that already, but that's one of the bands of the Karankawa Indians. And the Compano Indians are named that for Compano Bay. But Compano Bay was named by an early navigator early on who saw the Karankawas out in the bay and called it Coconate, which means little boat. Okay, so that's how Compano gets its name. So it's a navigator who put that on a map, and then everything gets named Compano after that. Okay. The first European explorers were Pineda in the 1500s, the Cabeza de Vaca. And then one really interesting group were the shipwrecks of 1554. And you can see more about them at the Maritime Museum. Then LaSalle came along and challenged the Spanish. So this was a big wake-up call for the Spanish who thought they owned all this property. And we have, of course, the wreck in Matagorda Bay, and then the settlement, which was called Fort St. Louis. They probably didn't call it that, but that's what we call it as we look at it. This is the shipwreck and the excavation. How many people got to see that excavation? Yeah, it was really fun. I worked for the Historic Commission on this project, and we set up a landing spot so that people could come in their boats and look over this into the excavation. So that's another talk. Okay, what I want to talk about today are these 4 sites, and you see them on this big map that's over there on the wall, but here we have them all. So the red star that I hope you can see on here is for Compano. And Compano, El Compano was actually set up by the Spanish officially as early as 1785, okay? And before that, it was used by the Spanish to supply all of their missions in the area. So here are the ruins. The ruins that you see today are of the town of Compano, and that doesn't get started until 1840. So it was used by the Spanish and the Mexicans, but it doesn't really get, these ruins that you can see out there, came along after the initial settlement, when they decided to go back and really make a port out of it. So here you see as early as 1785, and then the first Irish settlers come in 1829, and that is the group led by James Power. So we have James Power over here as a stand-up. Okay, so you can see Mr. Power. He was very influential in this area. And then during the Texas Revolution, first of all, the Mexicans controlled the port, and then the Texans came in and got it, and then it went back to the Mexicans and then back to the Texans. So it's really kind of a fun story. This is some of what you can see today. It's definitely crumbling into the water. It's privately owned. We've made, introductions, tried to get the property sold for a state monument, but that just hadn't worked out. I did, as I mentioned, work with the A&M University to map that whole area. We were out there for a month doing all the mapping, no excavation. This is a map of what it looked like, who settled it. This was a map that was done around 1930 by one of the prime historians in the area named Houston. And so he recorded all of this, the buildings that were still visible and there, and then went back to people who knew who had lived there. So it's really an interesting, well-documented story. Oops, let's see. So here's some of the ruins that we mapped. As you can see, there were foundations, quite extensive foundations and cisterns. And one thing people don't realize, these were built out of shellcrete. And shellcrete is a mixture like concrete, but with a shell hash instead of your typical gravel. Okay, so shellcrete is formed into blocks, which you can pretty well see along here, and then it was stuccoed, okay? So they were not living in an area that looked like this at all. There were stucco and they were painted white. It preserves the building blocks, and it's a very important part of it. So you can see the shellcrete wall out in our garden display, and you can see it fell over. Actually, I'll show you in a minute where it came from. And then out at the town of Compano is one plot for the Plummer family. This is not the same as Charlotte Plummer. I was hoping it was, but it's not. Anyway, the Plummer family did create their own little plot. We were never able to find a major cemetery, and there must be one out there somewhere, but we never found it in the month that we were out there. Okay, next, Aransas City, which is your blue star. I don't have a pointer, but I hope you can see it. Blue star right on the edge of Compano Bay. And we're very fortunate that at one point the Krennics lived on that point. And Harry Krennic was a professor over at Del Mar and previously up in West Texas. But he saw artifacts sloughing off of the and picked them up on the beach and started a really extensive collection. And so when he moved to Central Texas, he donated those materials to us, which is really one of our prime collections. You'll see them over in that case in the very front room. They still have their tags on them because every one of those artifacts has been recorded in our system, okay, so that we know what we've got. Maureen left the tags on those so you can see just how we take care of archaeological artifacts. Here's an aerial of it. And so you're coming from Rockport and you have to look right in here, okay? That's where right in that tree formation there is where the bluff is. It was formed by James Power in partnership with Hewitson. And so they came in with an impresario grant, just like Stephen F. Austin had. So many people just think of Stephen F. Austin and his colony and they don't get any further. But this colony right here, the Power Hewitson colony, was really important. And Compano was even more important for about 4 more impresario grants. This is where they came, okay? You'll see this poster on the wall, so be sure and take time to read some of the details there. And there is a schedule that shows you we have talks on Sunday afternoons every other week while we start this exhibit. So there'll be one talk on Aranza City that'll go into even more detail about it. I love this one because one of the things people say immediately, how in the world did they get sailing ships in here? You know, that just is really something to behold. Anytime I get out on the bay, you know, go along on a fishing trip that I really just enjoy being out there, I start imagining, how did those sailboats get in here? How did the people survive and get all the way over to Compano in this area? How did they do that, you know? Well, here's a map that one of the captains made from 1830s, okay? So the natural channel coming into Aransas Bay came all the way up to Compano. It did not go to Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi wasn't even here. And it's only in the 1920 when the channel gets dug to Corpus Christi that ships start going that way. So before that, everybody came in this direction because it was a natural channel, okay? And I'm really glad Corpus got the channel because I wouldn't want all the refineries right here. So we're okay with that part of the story. Okay, this is just a rundown really quick of James Power, Aransas City. And then the things that happened, again, I'll talk in more detail about all of this, but even when they were set up on the point over there, they still got raids from the Native Americans and from the Mexicans, okay, because the Mexicans saw James Power as a revolutionary, so they were not looking on him favorably. He had some friends, some Mexican friends, but mainly the Mexicans were really challenged by all of the Anglo settlers who were coming in. I love this picture. This is a sketch, may be difficult to see, but this is a sketch that was made in 1842 by a naval officer, okay? And what you see is the settlement up here on the bluff. And if you are on the Lamar side of the Compano Bridge and you start back toward Rockport, you can see this too. You can see it's low lying, it's a bluff, and then it's low lying when you get back over to the bridge. So if you can pause or go to one of the Nav District parking lots here and look at this bluff, you'll be able to see where this little town was. So this naval officer kind of recorded it. Look, there's even a steamship. Oops, sorry. Let's see if I can go back. This is just an illustration of artifacts from this site that James Power settled, and more photographs of that are out on this table over here that says, be an archaeologist. So there are several categories on that table. First of all, there's ceramics, pottery, and what you can learn from that. And then these are over there. Oops. Somebody get it. Oh, it's mine, okay. Just stop it. No wonder it's so loud, right? Okay, so these are wine seals. You can see the blow-up picture of them over on this table. Wine seals were put on the shoulder of a wine bottle. So you've got a wine bottle, and you finished it, you've just made it, you've just blown it either into a mold or freehand, and you take another blob of hot molten glass, put it on the shoulder of the wine bottle, and then put the stamp on it. So that's how this kind of a designation gets going. So it's like a label. But can you imagine, we're here, we're talking about Aransas City, 1830s, right? 1830s. And they're drinking French wine. Okay, isn't that great? Okay, another thing we found was Navy button, okay, from the Texian Navy. It's very hard to see. It's really, practically dissolved. But there are replicas out there today. You too can get a replica button, and this is how one of the uniforms would be set up. So again, the question that always intrigues me, who came to Aransas City to visit the Power family or some of the other 100 families who lived there and lost their button off their Okay, Lamar was the next settlement that gets formed, and this was in competition with Aransas City. It was formed by another Irishman, James Byrne, and so he set up a town over at Lamar, and it remained a town, I believe, until the 1920s when it was pretty active. Now it's just a community without a town government or anything like that. But we've got a rivalry going on here at Aransas City. Sam Houston supported that colony. At Lamar, guess who supported them? What Texan politician?
Marabou Lamar.
Thank you. Okay, Marabou Lamar. So Houston and Lamar were not friends. Okay, Houston was the first president, and Lamar was the second president. Then Houston comes back in. But when Lamar was president, they named this community after him. And what they did, because they had the political influence now, they got Lamar to transfer the customs house over to Lamar, okay? Because wherever the customs house was, that's where people had to check in. I don't know how they managed that, but anyway, they did. And so then there really weren't many people there over in Lamar, so it came back over to Power in Aransas City. So here we are looking at Lamar today. And the main settlement was all along the shoreline. In fact, even on the left-hand side of the highway, this is showing it to you going north. And this is what they planned. They were pretty ambitious, like some of our real estate folks today. They had it all laid out, okay, right? Everybody could get a plot of land. Well, so one of the investors in this land was Samuel Colt, okay? So there's this big myth, okay, about Samuel Colt. And when we first arrived here, somebody actually took me and my husband over to a shack in Lamar and said, "This is where Samuel Colt made the pistols." Oh, whoa, no way, okay, no way, okay. I mean, this was 100 years later, anyway, for starters. And it didn't happen, but the rumor got started because Colt did have a contract on some land there, okay? And he was investing in things all over the country, and so somebody talked him into investing. But he never came here, and his family just turned the land back in a quick claim. So there was never a Colt factory here. Samuel Colt never came here. Phil and I were in the Connecticut one time, and all of a sudden we saw the Colt factory up on the hillside there in Connecticut out of Hartford. And so we went. The factory is being turned into lofts, right? And the poor person running the office there had no idea what we were talking about. I mean, it was just apartment sales to her. So we did, though, get to the main museum in town, and they had a whole floor dedicated to Colt. So we checked that out. Phil got in contact with the curator at that museum and got all the information that he could on Colt, and pretty well proved he never could have been here. just didn't fit into his time frame. So it's kind of it's still interesting though. So here's a poster again. It's on the wall. You can read more about it. I've already talked about Lamar. So Byrne was the primary fellow. This is just a sketch of what it might have looked like. It was important, and during the Civil War, the Union came through Compano and raided each of these little communities. They really didn't kill anybody or really hurt anything and much, I mean, but they did go in and try to get supplies and whatnot. Here's the bunker house. It's on Front Street over there in Lamar. Some of you may know that. And in fact, we have a wall from the bunker house because the owner of that has been very supportive of here. And during Harvey, one of those walls fell down, fell over. And so he knew he wasn't really going to be able to put it back together or patch it back together. And so he donated it here to the History Center. So you can see a wall of the bunker house out in the yard, just off the parking lot. Here you go, more about it. Again, you see the courses of shellcrete, okay, that frame this house. This is just a painting of it earlier on with a little bit more of it showing. And then, of course, the Stella Maris Chapel, which is still over there in Lamar, that was built in the 1850s, but moved in 1985. The Historical Society was formed in 1985 just to get the money together to move the Stella Maris, okay, off of the Schoenstock property. So that's how all of that happened, kind of recent. Okay, the gold star that you see over again at the north side of Compano Bay. Today, you would think it was very near Bayside, but they're actually adjacent. Okay, so the foundations for St. Mary's are out there. I know the owner of some of the property. She keeps promising that we can come do an archaeological survey, so I got my fingers crossed on that one. Here is, again, a painting. So we didn't really have so much photographs or so much in the way of documentation of what was over at St. Mary's, but what I love, and this one, I think there's a windmill in one spot, there's a hotel, there's saloons, multiple saloons actually, or barrel houses. They call them barrel houses because they have the liquor in barrels and scooped it out of there. So this is kind of fun. St. Mary's was an 1856 plot, okay? And again, some of the same people who had been at Lorenzo City turn around and go to set up St. Mary's. So it's just sort of a developer syndrome, right? They think they can do a better job. And so then again, a new community. St. Mary's was really important for bringing in a lot of building supplies. As you all are, I'm sure, aware, we don't have trees to build with around here. And so almost any of the things that needed wood as a part of it had wood brought in. Some from Louisiana, but primarily from Florida. So it's very interesting. You can track that down in many different ways. Again, this area is sort of famous for the two personalities, and we have these guys standing up watching you right now. So Hobby was one of them who was in that community. He led some Confederate troops, and then you may know him because one of his descendants, about two generations down, was Governor Hobby, okay? And I'm a Hogg's father, okay? So maybe you can start to make connections there. So Hobby was a really important person who came from St. Mary's. And the other person is Clara Driscoll. Okay, you probably know locally of the Driscoll Hospital scenario. So Clara Driscoll was born in St. Mary's, and then she lived here in Rockport for a few years in a boarding house with her family, and then they moved a little further south. She spent most of her time away because she was in school and then married and didn't really stay in this area initially, but came back and did a lot of good things here locally. So we think, let's see, here's Clara in a picture, but we got her standing up over here so you had to see her. So artifacts from St. Mary's can actually be seen in the Ontario County Museum. It's a little log cabin, kind of about a half a block off the main street. I don't believe that it's opened again after Harvey. It was severely damaged, and so I'm not sure about the status of that, but it's an amazing museum if it is open, so you can check it out, see if anything's open over there. And there is still a St. Mary Cemetery that you can, if you enjoy looking at those gravestones. This has an 1857 date on it. And then the Wood House is over in Bayside, it's called today. So this home was started by John Howland Wood, who actually died here in Rockport, and there is a Wood home on Magnolia Street. He died in his son's house here. But he initially came down to fight in the Texas Revolution. He got here after San Jacinto Day, so he didn't get to fight, but he joined the Army for a little while. So he got payment as in land and was able to establish a big ranch over there that he called Bonnie View. I mentioned that to somebody, and they said there's still a subdivision over there called Bonnie View. But this house that you see in the top right hand is what it looks like today. It's being restored. The bottom left is when it was out there on a prairie, just kind of all by itself. And the stories go, it's got a widow's walk way up on the top there. The story goes that Wood was able to stand up there and watch his territory, see who was working and who wasn't. So he was involved in that. It did get severely damaged in this picture on the right by Harvey. In fact, it was a hotel at one time, and the back section of the hotel started leaning, okay? So it essentially disconnected from the main part of it. But fortunately, we had some people interested in purchasing it and bringing it back to life. They got some money from the Texas Historic Commission to do some of the renovations, so it is up and going now. We are going to sponsor a trip over there in September or October, and Tiz back in the corner is going to be arranging that. So be sure you leave your email with us so we can let you know when that comes up. Okay, whoops, got a picture upside down. Well, that just makes you even more curious, right? What in the world is up there? I just want to remind you that we do have a permanent exhibit in the 2 rooms right back in that corner that I'm pointing to. That's a permanent exhibit about Aransas County. And it's essentially a timeline, so if you walk around, even though it doesn't say that, that's what you've got, a timeline of what happened in this county. And we're really proud of that exhibit. We put it up at the request of a board about 3 years ago. And so you go between the artifacts and the posters and can really get the whole story briefly, because there's not room to go into all the kind of detail. So after we did that, then we began to kind of break off and tell more of the story in exhibits like this. This exhibit gallery changes 4 times a year. So you're here today, and we'll have this exhibit up now, August, September, October, into the middle of November. So come back and get more of the details, because they're here on the walls, or whoever's here can talk to you more about it. Any questions right off the bat?
Can you talk about the economy of those towns? Because it was not oil, gas, anything that now it's the reason of port in Corpus. Can you talk about the,
Sure,
cattle,
these were all
turtles?
ports. They were port towns, and so you had the sailing vessels coming in here where it was very convenient. Again, they stayed with the natural channel so they could get on in. So they brought supplies in and took hide and tallow out. Okay, so hide and tallow was the main product, especially for Rockport and Fulton. There were 12 hide and tallow factories. That means and this was after the Civil War. Okay, Rockport didn't get founded until 1871, after the Civil War, because during the Civil War, many of the men were off in Virginia and on the East Coast fighting, so it was just the women and children taking care of their homesteads. Many of the cattle and horses got loose, and they really ran on what's called the Wild Horse Desert. That's between Nueces and the Rio Grande, okay? all they had to do when they came back from the Civil War was round up some cattle and bring them into the port. At first, they started putting them on ships live, and then they formed hide and tallow factories. We had 12 in this area, hide and tallow factories. They would strip the hide off of the cow, boil the meat, and save the tallow or the fat, and that got put into kegs, and then those got shipped out. And so all this went on for about 10 years, but that was the basis for it initially. Okay, and then of course what was coming in was what I already mentioned, which was the lumber and building materials like this. And so each of these communities had their own storefront, whatever you want to call them, the mercantile. They all had 1 or 2 saloons. They had a hotel and a church. So they were set up like small, self-functioning towns. Even though they had communication by water, they didn't have communication by road. Remember that. So these sailing ships were terrifically important. I've been accumulating sort of a file of the names of ships coming into Compano, and that's just a continuous project. But it's really, really interesting. I think we'll be able to put more together on that. Thank you, Nellie. Any other questions?
When's the first Sunday talk?
Let's see, I'm going to look at my sheet here. It will be on the 25th. Okay, so essentially 2 weeks, but it's on Sundays. Thank you. 2 o'clock on Sundays, we run a lecture series. That one will be on the town of Compano and the Irish immigration. It's going to be by Dave Krotsky, who's a local archaeologist with Parks and Wildlife. And then on September 8th, I'm scheduled to do a more detailed talk on Orange City. And September 22nd, Joe Fox will talk on Lamar. So we'll go into more detail on each one of those towns.
Is he gonna talk about the sea turtles?
I'm sorry.
Is he gonna talk about the sea turtles that used to be there?
Or, I'm not sure what he's talking about.
That's here.
There?
That happened in Fulton. Yeah, that was much later.
Yeah, canning of the turtles.
That was in
Yeah.
1900s.
Yeah. We recording those individual. We do. In fact, right now, the video is being made of this, and we'll compress it and put it up on our screen, and then we put it up on the website. Okay. But first of all, it goes on the screen during this time, and each one of them is recorded. Thank you. Yeah. So be sure to go to our website. And also, I caught a few of you, but if you're not a member, guess what? I have a membership brochure. These things don't just happen, you know, it doesn't just spring out of the ground, it happened. We are free and open 4 days a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And we do have a part-time employee, so your donation essentially of a membership is really valuable to us. So I've got those membership brochures that conveyed like that. I know a number of you are already members. You're already a member if you got our postcard, which we mail out for each new exhibit. And then we have a monthly update, kind of a monthly newsletter, really short, that we'll send you based on your email. Yeah. Other questions? Oh, great. We hope you'll stay, look around. We just have a little bit of water out, but gosh, it's so hot. We hope you'll have a small bottle of water and enjoy all of the posters that are up. The committee worked really hard to get this together, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.